when they could have just gone another step, one more day might have been to reach their goal, and they just didn't see the results yet and they gave up too soon. That success could have been right around the corner. I just kept on doing the things that I knew I was supposed to do, and then it showed up.
Welcome to the Built for Winning podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Friday. Built for Winning explores physical, mental, social, and spiritual growth through conversations with intriguing guests, helping individuals and teams close the gap between potential and performance. Today's guest is Chip Pugh. Chip is the director of team development for the Tennessee Titans, where he works closely with team captains, leaders, and coaches to build culture, strengthen leadership, and shape messaging. He also serves as the team chaplain. Before joining the Titans, Chip spent 25 years in the college space, primarily in football, working in strength and conditioning, leadership development, and serving as an instructor and campus minister. Chip is also creator of the Be One, Make One system, designed to help people discover their God-given purpose, and the author of Made to Win, 6 Practices of Jesus for a Life on Mission. He brings a unique blend of NFL experience, coaching, and real-life discipleship into this conversation. Chip, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Jeff, it's great to be here. This is exciting. Just thinking about all the things that we have in common. What a blessing it is to me to hang out with you, and really excited to jump into the discussion.
Really looking forward to the conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to kick off a few things with a few rapid fire questions so everyone can get a chance to know you a little bit better. What's one belief you have that most people would disagree with?
I think one that a lot of people disagree with me on is I think there's more than one LeBron out there. I do. I think there's LeBrons out there that have never reached their full potential, and LeBron James is one that did. He found a way to dig in and really maximize who he is. But I think there's one out on the street corner somewhere that could have done it too, that just didn't have the tools, didn't have the people in his corner, didn't have the belief.
He was made to win.
That's right. That's right. There's more of them out there made to win, and they don't know it. Yeah.
What's the most common mistake you see when it comes to performance?
Well, that's got to be that people give up too soon. They do. They give up too soon. When they could have just gone another step, another one more day might have been to reach their goal, and they just didn't see the results yet and they gave up too soon.
It's hard to be patient, isn't it, Chip? We want immediate rewards. And when you talk about something like mastery or mastering a skill, you actually spend more time in a plateau than you do in a peak of learning.
There's no doubt. And who knows if you would have just kept going, that success could have been right around the corner. Because for me, I'm sure you could say too, Jeff, that the times where I have seen those results, I didn't expect to see them at the time I did. And I just kept on doing the things that I knew I was supposed to do. And then it showed up. So that's got to be the thing that I see people that give up too soon.
What's the most underrated habit people overlook?
This one may not be what many would think, but I think it's praying. I really do. I think it's daily prayer and solitude. I did not realize how valuable it was to begin my days that way for a lot of years. But when I finally committed to that practice, it's amazing what it's done to give me that mental, emotional space in the morning. And then, of course, I do believe that when I connect to God, something happens with that. But, maybe going back to what we just talked about, when we don't see that could be part of the results that I want, because you have to wait on God. It's easy to give up, but he just wants to meet with you. I see all sorts of advantage to that, of just having a time of solitude and daily prayer.
So, Chip, for you personally, what does that spiritual habit look like with prayer? In the morning, you maybe have a cup of coffee, then you sit down and pray or read the Bible. What does that look like on a day to day basis for you?
Yeah, it's evolved over the years. I did not do what I'm doing today back when I was a younger man, so I'll admit that. I spend quite a bit of time. It's the first thing I do every morning. I actually work out later in the day because of this habit. I just wanted to create that space. So I spend at least 30 minutes in committed prayer time. Then I spend another 30 minutes in reading the Bible and having my cup of coffee. Then I've got a 30-minute drive to work from where I work. So I actually have my worship time. I have something I do on the way to work. And so I spend just under a couple hours of just all that time with the Lord. And so I'm pushing 50 now. I know there may be young men here that's like, what? I didn't do all that, back in the day. Maybe I wish I would have, but for whatever reason, I am where I am, on my journey and evolution of where I am. That's where I'm at today.
Yeah, I think what I wrote down there, Chip, when you were talking about that, I wrote down the word sacrifice. You've been a strength coach for 25 years in the college setting. I've been a strength coach for a long time. I think we both probably really like the fitness aspect, but you put it on hold because you think there's something more important to start your day than a workout.
Absolutely. I tried to not do it that way. And for me, it just wasn't the same. I want to begin my day that way. It gets my mind right, gets me focused. And then I have some things that I do every day that are the same, like some gratitude time and then speaking my purpose, which is part of our system that you mentioned earlier. So I speak my purpose out loud that I receive from the Lord. It's hard for me to think about doing that later, even though I'm not saying it's wrong, but for me, it's really valuable to start that way.
Yeah, Chip, I do agree because I know in the structure of my own day, the morning time is when I'm most alert. Thoughts come to my mind. And as the day goes on, there's maybe some fatigue or distraction. And so you're devoting the best part of your day to the Lord.
Yeah, it's so valuable. Give your best. Give your best up front. And that's what the tithing principle is too. So I think that same way with my time. Yeah.
What separates average from elite in your experience?
I think that's consistency. So it's probably similar to what I just said of why people don't see the results or what's a mistake they make. The elite keep doing the right things over and over and over. And I would say that about people with their finances the same way. They just keep doing it. I see our best players, they have a routine that they do the same every day. They come in at the same time, have their pre-practice, post-practice routines. There's just a consistency, a reliability that they have with themselves. When I coached in college for a number of years, there's some very good college players I was around, but that was probably the biggest difference I saw with pro athletes is they were so consistent. Nothing could knock them off their routine, the best, that is. Now, there's guys at this level that don't do that, but they're not the elite guys. The elite guys are the ones that putting in that same thing over and over and over.
Yeah, for both of us being involved in the sport of football, everything is a routine building up to game day. So no matter how many days away from the game you are, every week it's the same routine building up to it. So we're involved in a sport where routines are we're a creature of habit, and actually routines help conserve energy in the brain. And so that's why routines are so important. It alleviates stress and anxiety. And so we're involved in that culture.
That's so good. That's so good. The mental space that you have when you're trying to come up with what to do every day that takes up, it's not good. But you can, you hear about somebody like Steve Jobs who wore the same thing every day, right? He said, I don't want to spend my time figuring out what I'm going to wear. I know what I'm going to wear, go to work, and I get that done. And those are the elite in any business. They've got it already laid out, just like their outfit. This is what I've got to do on Mondays. This is what I do on Fridays and so on. And then you've certainly got to make adjustments, just like we do in games. We got to make adjustments. You got to make adjustments if you see that something's not working. and then you get on that routine and stick to it.
What's something people think leads to success but actually doesn't?
I'm gonna have to say it's more. I think people think that just more is better. So go back to that routine. If it's, catching balls after practice, on the jugs machine, that's something that, is part of my routine. Doing more of that is not necessarily better. It might be, but just doing more could, be diminishing returns, right? And I know that that's the way in strength conditioning you see people get themselves in trouble. "Oh, I'll just do more of that." But really, simplicity is where the beauty is. You simplify of the things that you need to do, and you do those over and over, but not necessarily just stack more on top of it. You stack days, on top of it, or sessions, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a great response, more, because sometimes we do more to fill maybe a gap in our life. Maybe it's an emotional hit we're looking for. And so I remember when I was in the NFL and we went through a 2 hour workout, running for an hour, lifting for an hour. I mean, it was very taxing on the players. Well, after lunch, a couple guys would come in and get a little extra work in the weight room. And it always amazed me why they devoted their time to come back in the weight room when they had a great workout. And our sports psychologist says, well, they're trying to fill the emotional tank. And so sometimes, to your point, when we do more, we're just trying to fill that emotional tank, and maybe that time could be best used in a different way.
Yeah. And I've read that minimum amount that gets the results that you want is really where the gold mine is, where you can hit what you need to hit and then you walk away, and then you free your mind or work on the technique, or it might be that you need to help you be elite in your sport. That's a great example. Just doing more push-ups because you think that's going to get you to where you want to go. It's that law of diminishing returns. You'll tip that thing where it'll go the other way on you. And we know that about with overtraining physically. But the same thing can happen when spend too much time in the office or too much time behind a computer. That's not necessarily a good thing. I might be on top of my game if I walk away and I pick that up later when I'm sharp again.
Yeah, just like you mentioned earlier, the human body, we need to stress it and then you recover, come back stronger. It's the same thing with our brains and any other skill where our players sit in meetings for a long time. They need that break to just consolidate information. So more is not always better.
That's good. But I will admit that's been a hard skill to learn. And I think you've hit the reason why. I'm trying to fill my emotional tank with just doing more makes me feel good about myself, and maybe rings the bell and the Pavlov's dog. I did a little bit more. I checked that off, so I feel good about myself. But then what happens is I get more wear and tear, and I don't know that that's going to be good for me long term. And I would be one to admit I run up the mileage in some ways that I shouldn't have on this old body, and you will pay the consequences of that. Yeah.
Physical performance. I have a few questions on, we're strength coaches by at heart, so we have a passion for that aspect, the body. What are people getting wrong about performance right now?
I think I would point to a general piece of wisdom that I've learned is, where are you getting your information? I think that's one thing to pay attention to, of where I might be going wrong is my information. If it's coming from a novice, from someone who just can catch my attention online, it may seem like, oh, this is what they're saying to do, and that may sound good, but wisdom for me is, let me look at someone who's been at this for a long time and they have made enough mistakes where they could give me, here's the right things to do. And so, for instance, our strength conditioning coach here, common friend of ours, Zach Woodfin, amazing guy. He has done something really wise. He's brought on men on his staff, I've noticed, that are older than him, that can be someone who can give him some advice, some counsel, has seen things maybe that he hasn't seen. I thought that was so wise when he told me that. But I've tried to do the same thing of, like, if I'm going to take advice on my diet, I want to get somebody who's ahead of me, down the road further than me. If I want to get advice on my performance, somebody that's down the road, some not necessarily just someone who catches my attention and maybe even looks good. There's guys online I look, oh, man, that guy looks amazing. Well, it might be a reason why he looks amazing. It could be some performance enhancing things on top of the fact it might be his age, lower age, and genetics. So that doesn't always mean what he's doing is best for me. Let me get somebody that's wise, that's been around the block a little bit.
No, it's really good, Chip, because when you gave even the example with Zach, the strength coach there, there's a sense of humility by selecting someone who is maybe more knowledgeable than you on your team, and the ability to be coachable, be humble, and learn. That's a trait that some of us resist because of human pride of trying to be the smartest man in the room.
That's right. It takes humility, but that's strength, isn't it? Humility comes before honor, the scriptures say. So if I want to be honored by God and then even by others, humble myself, and I'm one to admit as well that's hard to do, but I need to surround myself and then also seek out counsel from those who have been there and done that.
Was a strength coach at Northwestern University in Chicago. That's where Northwestern is. And at the time, the Chicago Bulls were at their height with Michael Jordan. And I went to go visit the strength coach of the Bulls in their practice facility. And Phil Jackson, the head coach, was in there. And Phil Jackson, as the head coach, surrounded himself with a defensive coach who was well experienced and an offensive coach who was also well experienced they were each had experience on their sides of the ball, so to speak. What an example to, as a head coach, humble yourself, surround yourself with those who are maybe stronger than you in some of these areas to make the whole team gel at a high level.
So good. That's somebody who's wise, and look how many championships he won, right?
Yeah. If someone could build one habit that truly moves the needle physically, what would it be?
Obviously, your nutrition, the consistency of your nutrition. So more working out, more reps, more sets. That's not necessarily the best thing. Now that's going to work for any novice, but at some point you're going to have to find a routine that's going to be able to last. But I didn't see the biggest advantages personally, nor for my athletes either, until started really digging into nutrition and thinking about what's right. Now there's a lot of opinions out there, and also bodies are different. We respond differently. But once we dial in what is helpful in our nutrition for performance, then the consistency of that day after day, I think makes the most difference. And I'll again go back to our elite performers, guys that just think, what do I feel like eating today? And then I've got guys that, no, this is what I eat. This is when I eat. This is how much I eat. And they achieve the greatest things.
Yeah, that goes back to how we started this conversation with your daily habit of prayer. There's a sacrifice that occurs for you to do that prayer in the morning, the best time of the day. There's also a sacrifice, like you just mentioned, where sometimes you have to put in your body. There's an emotional side. You may emotionally want to eat this food, but you know that food may not help you towards your goal. And so there's a sacrifice that has to be made emotionally sometimes to put that right food in your body.
Yeah, fuel matters so much. Get the right fuel in.
I want to talk a little bit about mental performance. What mindset do the guys have who actually last at the next level?
Yeah, I love to talk about this because I love to think about mindset and where it comes from and what's the most helpful. What I believe is mindset begins with identity, with knowing who you are. Then it goes to where you're going, like your vision. And then it's about what I do. My mindset, it does involve my actions and my choices and my actions, but it begins with what I think, and specifically what I think about myself, who I am. And so I use the term identity when we talk about that. I know that word can be used in different contexts, different ways, but what I mean by that is, do I know who I am? Wrapped up in my identity is also my purpose, what I'm put on this planet to be and do. You come to, the Tennessee Titans where I work, and there's an identity in the NFL because just being attached to NFL, people know who that team is, right? But I played college football at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, with Bobcats. Growing up, never really thought about I want to play at Ohio U. That just wasn't. I didn't even know who it was. You might say it's not a T-shirt school. There weren't any T-shirts I had growing up in Ohio. So when I got there, I had to attach myself to this identity and then think, okay, who are we? Whereas where I grew up in West Virginia, and our one flagship school there, this could be debated, I guess, for some people who like Marshall, but flagship school there is West Virginia University. So I grew up wanting to go to that place. It had an identity in my mind. So if I went there, I knew who I was. I was attached to that. Probably closer to home, maybe up in there would be Ohio State. The Buckeyes. People know who they are. And going to Ohio, there wasn't this automatic identity of winning. And when we think about mindset, you had to have some coaches there to go, this is who we are. This is what we're about. We're establishing a winning culture. That wasn't just going to happen because they walked in the door. And so my coach, Coach Jim Grobe, I didn't know it at the time, but that's what he was doing. He was establishing an identity. These are the kinds of people we're going to be. This is the kind of way we're going to play, saying that, because he knew guys weren't walking in the door that way. Mindset's got to be there. Who are you collectively as a team, but then individually, who are you? Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe you have something to offer? And if you don't, it's really hard to then have a winning mindset of where I'm going and what I make the right choices if you don't believe first and have a foundation to stand on. This is who I am.
Yeah, Chip, talking about identity, I read your book, Made to Win: Six Practices of Jesus for a Life on Mission. I read that book cover to cover. One part of the book, I think you talked about identity in regards to knowing what your name means. And you talked about the meaning of Moses and what that meant and how that goes into your identity. Can you just explain to the audience a little bit about the name and how that goes into our identity?
Yeah, I think it's really important, Jess. I do. I had no idea how big a deal that was growing up. So for me, my name's Chip, but that's not my legal name. My legal name is Charles. Chip's nowhere to be found on my birth certificate, but everybody calls me Chip, and I get myself in trouble sometimes because they'll present contracts or mortgage statements, and they'll say Chip. I'm like, wait, this isn't my real name. It's not really legally binding. So I actually pushed away from Charles because Charles is this formal name to me. I didn't like it. I thought that's my dad. I'm the fourth, actually. So my dad and my grandpa and my great grandpa, So this unique identity I thought I had was Chip. But Chip just means you're like your dad. It means chip off the old block. That's what it means. So I got to digging on it later and in life as I was thinking about this important name, and this is just shows you what value was there for this process for me that I didn't know. I finally looked it up, and the name Charles means free man. What it means. And when I heard that, it was like this like light went off in me. I mean, it was like, what? My name means to be free, a free man. Like nothing can hold you back. You can be what you want to be. Nothing can enslave you, which and my faith, that's important to me to say that I'm free. But also just in life, like I get to go do what I feel like or I believe I was put on this planet to do and I don't have to have anybody's approval, to do that. That's what it says to me. And here I was shying away from that name, but maybe, there's some symbolism there too of I wasn't free. So that was my experience. But the reason I think it's important for people to do that is it is a way for you to remind yourself of who are you before you did anything, before you performed, before you did anything right or you did anything wrong. Because your name, at least for most of us, our names were given to us before we did anything, And that's the truth I'm after to help someone find their true identity is who were you hardwired to be? Who were you designed to be? And your name can be a symbol of that because it was given to you before. Now, I think it does connect well with Scripture. And throughout Scripture, there's names that are given over and over to people, and then they are called to live that out. Like you mentioned, Moses. But you can go back to Adam and see the original naming process. Adam was named by God, and then Adam named Eve. He gave that name. He spoke that name, at least. And then Eve named the boys. She gave the name. You catch those little nuances and you're going, they're speaking value over someone. They're speaking purpose over someone. They're saying, this is who you are. I've tried to do the same for my daughters, is to think about what do their names mean. And if someone comes to this and they're like, well, I don't like what my name is, oh, that's fine. Find something that is meaningful to you, about your name, or maybe think about that process of how you can speak, because there are things that be spoken over you by your past, by your accomplishments or your lack thereof, that we let get in our mindset. And we need to push back against that and say, no, this is what I'm about. This is who I am. And I think it's just such a valuable, valuable process.
So, from a faith perspective, how would that work through faith with identity?
The Bible says in John chapter 10, Jesus is talking about this illustration he gives of himself. He says, I am 7 times in the book of John, but one of those, actually 2 of them are in chapter 10. He says he is the gate. He is the shepherd. I am the shepherd. And then when he talks about the shepherd, he says, the shepherd calls his sheep by name. Another little nuance, that little nugget, I should say, maybe that's in the scriptures that maybe we don't see. So he calls a sheep by name. And if you look at how when he grabbed a hold of his disciples, he did that. He said, Simon, you are Peter. He gave him a new name, called his name out, and then he gave him a new name, and he spoke purpose over his. Peter means rock. And he looked at him and said, you're a rock. He called James and John the sons of thunder. Or you just take it at face value. He called their names, and said, you have worth. You have value. You're not just somebody. So I look at it like this, and you can see this in scriptures too. You have a team identity when it comes to your faith. Like, you belong to God. Like, I have the same status as any other disciple of Jesus, a servant of the Lord. That's who I am. That's my team identity. Just like on the front of my jersey, I play for a football team, probably has my mascot's name there. We have the same identity. But usually on the back of that jersey, most times, most teams have the last name of the individual. And so you have your individual identity. And Jesus does that too. He calls us out by name, but then he gives us an identity through him that we share in our team identity. And so I see that as, my worth is not in myself. No, it's in him and what he's done for me. But he sees my value within that and my unique gifts and talents and abilities that he wants to use for him. So I believe you want to grab a hold of both your team identity and your individual identity.
Yeah, I think that's great, Chip. And I even think about that team identity or our occupation. We are both coaches, and coaches, that term coach originated in the and was a horse and buggy, which transported someone from where they are to where they ought to be going. And so we as coaches take people from point A to point B in their development. Now, me and you have chosen the weight room or the strength and conditioning profession to help people move physically from point A to point B. But as coaches, we have a responsibility in human development to really take that human being or that athlete in all aspects of their life and move them along to point A to point B, and talk about a sense of identity or purpose. Yes, we have the faith component, but we also have that team or occupation.
Yeah, that's good. That I call it becoming. There is this. I see that there's this spectrum where I can go on, where I go from here to there, and my coach helps me move and become who I was designed to be. Jesus says, "Follow me, and I'll make you become fishers of men." There's a process there, and he sees my potential and he coaches me. He helps me follow him, and he brings me along this maturation that I go through in all areas of my life. Yeah, like you talk about. It's not just my spiritual walk, but really the spiritual walk goes into everything I do. I can become who I was made to be. And I'm not like everybody else. So my ceiling may be different. And if you're measuring those results, but the important thing am I on that way of becoming who I am capable of being? That's winning, really. Winning is maximizing your potential.
So, winning, when you say winning, how are you defining it? Is it maximize your potential? And how is that different from maybe what most people think it is?
Yeah, winning can be measured on a scoreboard. It can be measured on your bank account. It could be measured on you got the girl and or you got the guy. But really I see winning as maximizing your potential in when it comes to life in the mission. And the reason I tagged that last phrase on there is because we were put here to serve and help others win. And so my mission is common with all, that our mission is to overflow and help others. So in the very beginning, God said he made man and woman to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And that's always been our potential, is we can bear fruit. And then you see that across all things too, even literal fruit, a fruit tree. If a fruit tree is not bearing fruit, it's not winning, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And we were put on this planet to bear fruit. And that fruit then shows that I'm doing what I was supposed to do. I'm maximizing my potential, but it's serving someone else. And so maximize your potential in the mission is how I like to say it. And I should expect that can happen with my life. Not that the measurables are going to be the same as everyone else, because they won't. But for me, who can I be? Um, our coach here, Coach Sala, who I really respect, he talks about going to bed tonight better than you were when you woke up this morning, and that might be just in one little thing, in what you do. And I think that's another way of saying you're winning every day.
Your book talks about how Jesus developed in multiple dimensions: wisdom, stature, favor with God, favor with people. That's actually the template of my book, Built for Winning. Jesus grew physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. So that's a template that we should follow. But why do you think most people become lopsided in one area of life?
I think probably one of the reasons why we get lopsided and we kind of get out of whack a little bit is because we're chasing security in what we do instead of who we are. And what I mean by that is, if you look at those four and you just take stature, for instance, you take the physical development, what I can do physically in performance, that's great. It can be part of why you were placed here. It can be part of your platform and what God can use. But if I just put the focus on that scoreboard, on what I do, then I will become lopsided there instead of the person that I was called to do that. I want to get the be before the do. I want to get the identity piece right of who I'm becoming in front of the results. Because the truth is the results will take care of themselves. And so probably one of the best things I can do is say, what am I wanting to achieve? What I want to go after? What's my vision? But then quickly ask, well, who is the kind of person that can achieve something like that? Who do I need to become to do that? And then I put my focus on that, and that'll take care of it. And hopefully, we're putting the attention on the character attributes of and virtues and values of someone who is trying to help others win in life.
Yeah, you mentioned chasing security, and man, that's something that I struggle with. And really, I think that's a faith issue. If I have trust in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I put trust in Him, and that is my security. But man, it's hard because, like you said, sometimes those four pillars, they get lopsided because we're chasing something else, and that's the nature of the human heart.
Well, yeah, I thought football was really why I was put on this planet for a long time. At least that's the way I operated. And then at some point, everybody hits a dead end. Even Tom Brady finally came to the end, and Mine was in college, and my first big awakening was a major knee injury I had, and you realize, okay, so I'm not invincible, and this thing is probably going to end at some point. And so if that is what I'm putting my security in, it's going to be ripped away from me at some point. Well, the same thing would be true about anything else we're trying to do. It can be my career. It could even be in, none of these things are bad in and of themselves, but it could be in something that sounds even better than that, like my marriage. Like I want to grow in my relationship and my marriage. And if I make that everything in life, that's a lot of pressure to put on my dear wife that she's got to be my security. And so that it's almost like that image of you hold on so tight to something that you end up breaking it instead of saying, no, I want to become the person that God designed me to be. In that, I will be the best husband I can be to serve. And so I hope that makes sense. The kind of way I'm saying it there is that security and trying to hold on to that one thing really tightly.
In your book, Made to Win: Six Practices of Jesus for a Life on Mission, you talked about Jesus and spaces where he met different people. And so you talk a lot about intentional relationships and discipleship. How did Jesus model building people in different environments and different circles?
Yeah, there's been several people talk about this in different ways, but if you look at Jesus and his interactions with people, you can kind of see him moving in these circles, and there's actually numbers that are given. So one of the times is when you look at Luke chapter 10, it talks about him. He sent out 70 or so. Well, then you can read right past that and go, yeah, he had 70 people he sent out on this mission trip. But then you go, well, wait, who were these 70 and where did they come from? He must have spent enough time with them to trust them to go out and go on this trip together. And then there's 120 or so uh, at the end of his ministry that had gathered. And so you see that too. You see these numbers around that, and you're going, well, that's a big group that he was connected to, that he was in that circle with. But then inside of that group, we hear about the 12 disciples that he specifically chose for the mission. And then inside of that, there's this little number of three, Peter, James, and John. So when you step back and look at it, you go, there's these different contexts. There's a book that I came across called Discipleship That Fits. And the authors of that book, Harrington and Absalom, they called them discipleship contexts. And so I took that and started thinking about that. And I think about like spaces that we go in. So there's the public space where I'm interacting with all sorts of people, and Jesus did that too, with people that weren't even hitched up with him. He was just in that public space. But then there's this social space where you have that 70 to 120 or so, those people that he was close enough to, but he couldn't really get to know necessarily everything about him. But it was like a big team he was on. So I think about that with like a football team. We're all in this together. That doesn't mean I spend equal amount of time with everybody. Then within that, you've got this, what I would call your personal space, where you have that smaller team, or, on a football team, is probably your position group, certain number of people that you're hanging out with. Well, it's the same thing in life. You might have like a small group of people that you spend and do life with. But then even under that, the three, and that's where you can really get tight with somebody, where they know you in and out, you know them in and out. You can be transparent with one another. You can share your stuff like you're going through. Like I called one of them today. I had something I need to share that was kind of on my heart today. Well, there's only a few people you're going to do that with, right? That really know everything about you. We need those. And if I don't have those spaces that I'm getting in, it's hard for me to be well-rounded as an individual and grow. I need those touch points, because it's like we said before, you can go to one extreme and be lopsided and, oh, this is the only space I'm in. And it doesn't seem like that's the way God designed us to work. And I think Jesus bears that out. If he had these different spaces, then it's probably best for me to aim the same way. Probably not necessarily getting bogged down in numbers exactly, but there's a range that's different and there's different contexts.
Yeah, and if we go to that scripture of Luke 2:52, how Jesus grew, that relational, that social component, Jesus put a lot of energy, kinda almost as you described, into relationships. And so relationships and community was really important to, his ministry.
Amen. Yeah, he valued people. He took the time with one person at a time, but he also was in a crowd. And I love when that gets mixed together, like the story when he was in the crowd and then the lady touches his garment and he says, "Hey, power went out from me. Where was that?" And so he was in the crowd around all these people, but yet one person could get to him. And then he stops in that story and is interruptible. He was able to be interrupted where he was going because he took the time with this one person. So he developed long-term relationships, but he was also willing to say, what could God be doing right now with this one person who's in my path right now? Which is so good for us to remember that each and every day there are people put along our path for a purpose. And could it be that this is the person that I was supposed to spend time with? Yeah, I really believe that. There are no accidents. There's no coincidences. There's always divine order behind those things, especially when it comes to relationships.
Yeah, Chip, I agree 100%. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't you do an exercise where if you would remove one person from your life, how that your life may have been different? Just the importance of that. What can you explain to the audience what that exercise is?
Yeah, one of the things you can do to and really this goes into helping you understand who you are and what God is helping you become, who he's helping you become, is to look in your history of think about somebody that if you the one person that if they hadn't been in your life, your story would be totally different. Now you probably come up with more than one, but if you keep narrowing it down to the one person that my life story would just be just so different. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a coach, a teacher, or another relative. And so it does a couple things. One, it helps you say, well, what did that person bring to me to help me become who I am? And it tells you more about yourself. But then it also reminds you of their value, like how big of a deal they are, because your life story would be different if it wasn't for them. Yeah, I love those kinds of mental exercises. It helps us think that way.
Yeah, it just reinforces the value of a interaction with someone, a moment, so to speak. They did some research. They found out that there's 20,000 moments in a waking day that our brain registers either positive or negative moments. Neutrals, the moments don't really register with our brain, but in those moments, someone can be in front of you and can affect the rest of your life, or conversely, you can affect the rest of their life. And so sometimes it's easy for me to bypass that. I'm thinking about things in the future, my to-do list, and sometimes it's hard for me to just be in the moment, so to speak, to recognize the people in front of me.
That's such a big deal. What a great skill that is. And you know someone when you're in the presence of someone who has mastered that skill, you can see it where they're giving you their attention, they're present. And I gotta think Jesus was the master of that skill, right? Like he had it down better than anybody else.
So, as far as leadership, Chip, I mean, you deal with leaders within the Titans organization, team captains, front office, coaches. In college, you taught leadership. What does real leadership look like inside a locker room?
I like John Maxwell's definition of leadership. Leadership is influence, simply put. It's influence. And so when I think of if I am a leader, I'm having an influence, well, then that means anybody can be a leader. Anybody can have an influence. Well, the next question I need to ask is what kind of influence am I having? Or I might say, well, what kind of influence is someone having on me? How they're leading me. And in any locker room, there is a leader or leaders. And the way I think that it's good leadership is, am I helping someone else win? Am I having an influence on their ability to win? I think that's great leadership, or we might just call it a servant leader, because that's what a servant leader is doing, is they're saying, how can I help them win? And the true definition of service through love is that I'm choosing the highest, I'm having the highest regard or choosing the best for someone else, no matter the cost to myself. And that's really hard to do. You've got to mature as a leader to get to the point where you're saying, I want what's best for you, even if it means I don't get mine. And when you've got that in a locker room, look out. There's your winning teams. There's your Super Bowl teams. There's your championship teams. You've got leaders that say, I want to help someone else win. And you can see it on the field, can't you? I mean, you can see people, you can see the results of this team has come together. Well, it's because someone has said, I want to have an influence in such a way where I can help others win.
What's one moment or decision that has changed your life?
Wow, that's a big one, isn't it? One moment that changed my life. There have been many, but probably the one that I remember that's had a lot of impact on the way I think about things is I was walking with my mentor in college, and he looked down, he saw a penny on the ground, and he picked up the penny and he goes, "Hey, Chip, see this penny? That reminds me of how many people you walk by every day and you don't notice their value because there's been so many people that walk by that penny and didn't notice it." I just remember, I guess it was just the right moment when somebody taught me something. It's like a Mr. Miyagi type of moment where you're going, whoa, it just kind of blew my mind. And so I started to think about that. And physically seeing pennies has been a symbolic way, but thinking about who is the person I'm passing by and what kind of value they could have, or what kind of value they do have, and the potential they have. And what if I pay attention to that and I spend some time with them? I think about how I can help them and see them that way. That's transformed the way I think. And it really has launched my ministry, my coaching. I mean, everything I do really goes back to that mindset of looking for that one that has that value.
If we're talking from a spiritual side, what would be the turning point in your spiritual or faith?
So when I was in college, it was that around that same time I'm talking about, that particular man who discipled me. God used him. I had really good parents growing up, but probably like a lot of stubborn young men, didn't want to give in to the Lord entirely. I did it by word and did it by going to church, but didn't really have a relationship with God at all. Not one that transformed my life. So when I went to college, I met this man who sometimes people, they catch your attention in a different way. And he certainly knew how to walk with Jesus. I saw something different about him, even though he wasn't this weird religious guy. He's actually a former NFL player. It caught my attention by the way it impacted his life. And I'm like, there's something different here. I didn't know it at the time, but what was really happening was the Lord was coming after me and coming after my heart. And so I spent time with him and thought, 'cause I want to know what he had. Well, I ended up spending time in his home, saw how he served his wife, saw how he mentored his children. Everything was just so different than what I had seen before. And he began to really show me who Jesus was. Because I had a relationship with church, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. When I got to know who Jesus is, the man Jesus, the God man, that's when everything changed. And thankful to that man who pointed me that way, but I know he would agree too. My eyes then went on the man, went on Jesus, and the time I spend with him every day with Jesus is invaluable. I mean, it's just amazing. Now he gets to tell me everything I do in life, and that actually makes me more free than ever.
So, Chip, was there an actual moment for you in that turning point?
So the moment actually was when I was hearing the word preached. So I had gotten injured. I guess connecting back to something else I said, I got this knee injury. I was penciled in to be the backup center. That was my redshirt freshman year. I thought that was pretty exciting. My second year, I was already a backup, and the guy in front of me was not going to be there another year. So I was headed to be a starter, and pretty major knee injury. Lost that season. The team started traveling, like going on trips, and I'm not going on the trips. Well, I heard about this man being a guest speaker in the area. And my father, good dad, who knew probably, hey, he needs to hear something from another voice. He said, hey, why don't you go hear this speaker? Maybe he could be an encouragement to you right now. So I was very vulnerable at the time. Felt like football was being taken away a little bit, and heard him speak. And he spoke on John chapter 9 with a blind man. And man, I'd read some of the Bible, but not like that, man. When I heard him talking about Jesus coming to heal this blind man and it related to me, it hit me right in my heart. That's when things changed. So yeah, it was the preaching of the word was the moment.
So, with that change, Chip, could you just describe to the audience who you were before that encounter, and then how did that change you afterward?
Yeah. So I was not a a real vocal person. Wasn't out front of the crowd, kind of behind the scenes. Believe it or not, I was an offensive lineman. You know, I only weigh 180 pounds now, but I was 100 pounds plus than I am now back then. I was a big guy, but an offensive lineman, a lot of us tend to kind of stay in the background and serve and don't get the limelight. And I was that guy. And I mentioned that because I didn't see myself as like being up front or anything like that. And I think that that came out a lot in a timidity, you know? I don't know that I'm worthy of leading. And well, it was funny how that was a turning point where when I got a hold of a real relationship with Jesus, it started bringing out who I was, my natural gifts and abilities. And all of a sudden, I started leading on my team for the Lord. I started winning over some of my teammates. I was so much more confident in everything I was doing on the field and the weight room. Ended up coming back from the injury, ended up playing, and then gave my life to coaching and ministry. And what I think was happening was God was like, here's this like this clay that's not being maximized. He started molding me and he's going, I want to explode what this man can do. And yeah, I saw that in this guy. I saw something different about him, a boldness that he had, a confidence he had, but it was rooted in his faith, not in his accomplishments on the football field necessarily. It was just rooted in his faith. I thought, well, man, I can do that too.
Great. Chip, as we close, final question. If someone feels stuck right now, where should they start?
Well, it could sound cliche, but I don't want it to mean like that. I really do believe that anyone stuck, if they're willing, go to God in prayer. And when I say that, it can sound like, well, yeah, how do you do that and all that? But I mean, literally do what Jesus said to do. Ask me like a father for what you want. Your father loves you so much, he wants to give you the Spirit, he says. And so ask, and it'll be given. Seek, and you'll find. Knock, and the door will be open to you, Jesus says. If you would humbly ask. And I think of that with my children. I've got two teenage daughters, and so they're at the stage right now, they're things they don't want to talk to dad about, naturally, and I think that's understandable. But I tell them all the time, anything you want, anything you need, I want you to ask me. And I may say no, or I may say not yet, but I want them to ask. I want to know what's on their heart. Well, think about Jesus says our Father is better than any human father. Why wouldn't he want to hear what's on your heart? And you feel stuck, tell him, God, here's where I'm at. Then expect that he's going to answer in some way and watch what he does.
That's winning advice. Chip, thank you so much for this episode. Appreciate you joining us on the Built for Winning podcast. If this episode added value, share it with someone who needs it. Iron sharpens iron, and we'll catch you next time.